what's up? This is Josh Middleton from Architects and Solosis, and you're watching Sound Advice. So today I'm going to be talking about music theory, particularly from the point of view as a guitarist, and it's something that I really recommend to all players starting out, no matter what instrument you play. Just learning some basic theory, some basic scales, that kind of thing can eventually go a long way into taking you much further as a musician. And aside from being able to kind of improvise crazy shred solos and that kind of thing, the most important thing that I'm really grateful for learning some theory is just how much better it's made me as a songwriter, how much more streamlined my songwriting is, or just being at the point now where I can kind of work on ideas in my head, know what mode it's in, start mapping out chord progressions, all without having a guitar in my hands. Like, a lot of songs have been written like on a plane, where I've just been bored and had no guitar in front of me, but I've kind of got things going in my head. And most of that has just stemmed from some basic 3-note per string guitar modes that ended up just kind of expanding my knowledge of theory. I know in some circles that learning too much theory is kind of considered a bit lame or whatever. I think you'd be surprised at the amount of guitarists that were like secret shredders in the 80s that ended up joining like grunge bands in the 90s and just playing power chords and never playing like a solo, but had great theory knowledge and probably ended up writing really good songs because they had a really well developed ear for music. And I think one of the biggest benefits of learning your theory is that kind of natural ear training that comes with just, you know, using theory over and over again. Something that I hear, like as a guitarist or as a producer, sometimes recording other bands, is that it'll be like a harmonized section in a riff and maybe one or two of the notes just aren't in key, or maybe they're playing a solo and they'll hit a note that's in Dorian but the backing that they're playing over is in Aeolian, that kind of thing. Obviously there's a big distinction to make between, you know, jazz players who play outside, people putting in blues notes, or just deliberately playing out of key, compared to people who just, you can kind of tell when they haven't got a developed ear or haven't learned their theory and are just doing it because they don't really realize that they're doing it and that kind of thing. So I think some people naturally, you know, there are some amazing guitarists, even lead players, that never knew any theory, and some people that have tried to approach it without knowing any theory and just not gone as well. So as a blanket approach, anytime I taught guitar, I'd kind of always just, you know, push some theory onto people. And it's something that I personally did a lot of, you know, theory and learning my scales when I was younger. So I don't know if I would naturally have had a good ear for music, or it's something that's just come with time and practice and just repetition, that kind of thing. But learning theory doesn't need to be some really daunting thing. It can just be as simple as doing what I did, which was just learning 3-note per string modes on the guitar. So you learn your major scale, and then there are scales within that scale, and you learn one shape, go up one, down the next, and that's all I really practiced for a long time. I'd be doing from one octave, from a low F to a high F major, 3-note per string modes. I'd be doing it with picking every note, so I'd be with a metronome, so I'd be picking every note. I'd be working on my picking, my coordination between hands, and all these scale shapes would just be going in my brain. And then I'd work on moving those shapes around, so I wasn't relying on the same fret markers to remember all the shapes. So it was actually quite a long time before the theory behind these just scale shapes that I learned. It was a while before the theory kind of sunk in and I knew how to apply them, what kind of chords were related to each of these modes, and that kind of thing, and how to use them improvising wise. So it doesn't need to be like some big daunting task, just opening up like textbooks and learning and memorizing theory. It can just be something that, you know, gradually starts to sink in, and that's what it did with me. And like I said, from the moment of like learning all the modes and practicing that, it was probably a year or two until I was like, oh right, so I see how all these different scales link up and how I can use them, and how like I can see the key or hear what key these songs are in without even picking up a guitar and that kind of thing. So I think a really good basic approach is just learning some basic shapes, finding some backing tracks online. For instance, you find like a flat Mixolydian backing track and just learning that shape and trying to practice improvising within that scale shape and that kind of thing. And after a while, just kind of expanding your knowledge, it can really take you quite far. Just that knowledge of just the modes as a guitarist. Basically, all my knowledge of theory essentially stemmed from that. And once I got my head around all the modes and how to apply them, it just completely opened up the fretboard to me in terms of improvising and then writing riffs and then chord progressions and that kind of stuff. So I really recommend learning some basic theory, and if you're a guitarist, checking out 3-note string modes. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys soon.